Hey y'all, what's up? It's Friday, so I'm gonna keep it black, but I'm gonna keep it brief. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. I would just like to start by saying that I was speaking at George Washington University a few months ago, and the children were asking me how to buck the faculty system and overthrow a few bad apples. And I was very wary of encouraging students to do anything that would jeopardize their very expensive education. But if this week's current events will reveal anything to us, is that these kids are not pressed in the slightest. And I live all over the country. Students from Emory, Columbia, UCLA, Vanderbilt, USC, Cornell, Yale, Rutgers, Princeton, and the list goes on, have taken various approaches to civil disobedience and disruption in support of Palestine, particularly in the form of encampment. Since the responsibilities of the world have seemed to distract us adults enough, or rather pressured us into maintaining business as usual, the college students have taken charge of the resistance movement. But that shouldn't come as a surprise, because college students, hell, even regular students have been at the forefront of major political movements for some time. Do you remember why the Birmingham Children's Crusade happened? Because adults and parents were intimidated, faced with the threat of losing their jobs, faced with the threat of being imprisoned or assaulted with no one to look after their families. The children, with no such attachments or obligations, stood in the gap. As is taking place today on a far larger scale, much like it took place in the 90s against apartheid. But I digress, because we already talked about that. What I want to get into is the response these students are getting. These protests are being held to pressure institutions to sever any business with Israel, dissociate from any businesses doing business with Israel, as well as any business with weapons manufacturers. Ooh, a little cherry on top, I see. But the schools and the police is showing their ass. Footage of the police brutalizing children and faculty is running circles around the internet. And on top of that, we saw the police at UCLA stand by and watch as a Zionist mob went to town on the children themselves. And now they are removing masks off the kids' face so they can't hide from their families or future employers. That very sentiment has very sinister implications. But I expect our policing system to be raggedy. What's shady, sneaky, nefarious, and should be expected at this point is what the government has done to sanction this type of treatment against students. The Supreme Court allowed the Fifth Circuit to effectively gut the First Amendment right to protest in 3 states. And the House is passing a bill that declares anti-Zionism or any critique of Israel as anti-Semitism. I want to take a break here to remind you that we need to elect candidates in the midterm elections that won't support shit like this. That will also start demanding a review of whether the Supreme Court is an effective mechanism of jurisprudence anymore. In the meantime, what I want you to get into that you can start asking questions about today is this idea that it would be too difficult for schools to divest due to their complex investment portfolios. Linda, is this on? We do not care how difficult divestment is. It simply cannot be more difficult than government-sanctioned annihilation. And those are their words, not mine. And private institutions, which most of these are, can keep their financial information private. Columbia, for instance, has upwards of a $14 billion endowment, and whatever complexity that is made up of is completely under wraps. Therefore, by design, it's difficult for the students and the public to grasp and see for themselves or have any input on what they'd be willing to sacrifice to make divestment possible. So Columbia flat out said no, but has offered to create an expedited timeline for review of new proposals from the students with an advisory committee for socially responsible investing. Girl, Northwestern agreed to instead cover the cost of attendance for 5 Palestinian undergrad students and provide safe spaces for both Muslim and Jewish students. Brown, on the other hand, offered a deal to their students to remove their encampments in exchange for a vote to divest from Israel. And good for them, but here's the information you can use in your personal lives today. Much like the tainted endowments of these top universities, your 401k is probably tied up in companies you don't even know about based on your employer. As You Sow, a major nonprofit committed to promoting corporate social responsibility, estimates that Americans are investing $46.5 billion in gas, oil, and coal expansion through their 401ks. And in figuring out my own retirement situation, I learned that you can in fact build a socially responsible investment portfolio or a green portfolio to make sure that you're not putting your money into unethical pots. Just know that those plans will not set you up anywhere near the same as a conventional 401k. But that's the thing. We gotta stop allowing the bad things to be what's conventional. We do not care if it's difficult. We are saying that we do not accept the prioritization of capitalism over human lives, even with what I'm doing right now. Companies are saying no to pulling support from or refusing deals with influencers who are choosing not to ignore what's happening in the world. Corporations are refusing to support good messaging from good people for the good of the world because they don't want to offend somebody. But what kind of people would we be? How could we justify millennia of evolution? What kind of claim to humanity could we make if we saw the world on fire and didn't try our hardest to make it rain?